There's something devastating about watching your own child transform before your eyes, not into a monster. No, but into someone who measures your presence like an invoice, counting how much you cost instead of how much you've given. This story doesn't start with a scream. It begins with silence, the kind that wraps around your chest like a vice. It was 3:00 p.m. The house was too quiet, just the hum of the old fridge and the ticking wall clock above the pantry. I moved slowly, putting the kettle on the stove and reaching for my favorite mug. It was faded now, with little rose patterns hand-painted by Albert, my late husband. He gave it to me on our 20th anniversary. That was 18 years ago. He died at his desk in the tax office where we both worked. One moment he was scribbling down numbers, the next, gone. No warning. I was 44 then. I made up my mind that day I'd never remarry. Not because I didn't want love again, but because I had already been loved the right way. I had been respected, and I wouldn't settle for anything less. The kettle screamed. I poured hot water over black tea leaves. No sugar, no milk, just strong and bitter, like how I learned to take life. I sat at the kitchen table, the one that had carried years of moments, birthday cakes, baby bottles, divorce papers, even my son's wedding plans once. And now it held unpaid bills. Electricity $120, gas $80, internet and cable $150. I barely used the cable. That was for the kids, my grandchildren. I opened the bank statement. My pension $1,000 like always, but $800 went straight to the mortgage. The house wasn't mine alone. I had co-signed it with my son 4 years ago when his wife left him with 2 kids and no place to go. He was 31 at the time. He said it was temporary. Just until I get back on my feet, Mom. I believed him. I believed in him. I gave him $45,000 from my savings for the down payment. He promised, you'll only cover the mortgage for a year, maybe 2. Then I'll take over. 4 years later, I was still paying. His delivery job barely covered gas and groceries. Every month, I quietly filled the gaps. No complaints. I clipped coupons, wore shoes until they fell apart, hadn't had a vacation since Albert passed. But whenever my son walked into the kitchen and said, Mom, can we talk? I already knew another 100 here, another fix there. School supplies, field trips, broken heater, laptop braces, therapy. The worst part. He never once asked how I was doing. To be fair, the kids were sweet. Gracie, the little one, always hugged me goodnight. You're my favorite person, she'd whisper. Ryan, the older boy, was quieter but always polite. They didn't raise themselves. I cooked. I cleaned. I did homework with them. I watched every penny like I was still living in 1987. But lately, things changed. My son grew cold, short. He looked at me like I was in the way, like I didn't belong in the home I helped pay for. Last week, I had suggested maybe we split a few bills. He rolled his eyes. You live here for free, Mom. You don't get to make decisions. I didn't respond. I just folded the laundry. But something inside me cracked. It wasn't the insult. It was the quiet erasure of everything I had done. That evening, I stared out the window. Across the street, Mr. Humphrey watered his lawn. Every day, same time. His wife had passed, too. We didn't speak much. Just a wave here and there. But I envied the peace in his house, the respect he had for his space. That night, my son walked in, tossed his phone on the counter without a word. I called out, dinner's ready in 20 minutes. He just grunted. Over dinner, he mentioned something about the utility bill being high. Then he looked at me, expression blank. Maybe it's time we talked about your contribution to the household, he said. Just like that. Maybe it's time we talk about your contribution to the household. My son said that over dinner, like he was reading a script. His voice wasn't angry. That would have been easier to deal with. It was calm, almost casual. That's how you know they mean it. I looked up from my plate stunned. I couldn't eat any more. That word contribution kept echoing in my ears like an accusation. I went to bed that night, but I didn't sleep. I lay staring at the ceiling fan, watching it spin slow circles, like it was trying to hypnotize me into forgetting everything I've done. Around 3 a.m., I gave up trying to rest. I got up tiptoe to the kitchen and sat at the table again. Same mug, same cold tea, same stack of bills. But now it felt different. He had drawn a line, and I wasn't on his side of it. 2 days later, it happened again. I was rinsing plates at the sink after dinner. My back ached, but I didn't complain. He walked in, grabbed a beer from the fridge, leaned on the counter like he was preparing to pitch a business deal. "Mom, we need to talk," he said. "Every woman over 60 knows that line. It never means something good." I dried my hands slowly and sat at the table. He stayed standing, beer in hand, like a manager about to fire someone. "I've been thinking about the finances," he began. I nodded, not sure where it was going. "I work full-time. I handle groceries, gas, the kids. And well, you don't really contribute directly." I blinked. "You're here in the house all day." He continued, "But you're not paying rent or for food. It's not really fair anymore." That word again. Fair. I took a deep breath and said, "I pay the mortgage, the electricity, the gas, the internet. I co-signed this house with you." He waved a hand, dismissing it like an old receipt. "That was 4 years ago. You've been living here rent-free." And just like that, I was no longer a mother. I was a tenant overstaying her welcome. He leaned in again. "Look, it would be easier if I managed all the finances. We could set it up so your pension goes straight to my account. I'll take care of the mortgage, the bills, everything. You'll still get maybe $100 a month for personal stuff." He said it like it was generous, like I should be grateful. I looked at my hands, arthritic fingers, stiff knuckles. I'd folded every towel in this house, cooked every meal, budgeted every dollar. "I don't need you to take care of me," I said quietly. "I've been taking care of this family for years." His voice sharpened. "It's time to be realistic, Mom. You're retired. You don't have the same responsibilities I do." "No," I replied. "I just have you." He flinched. "Not much, but enough." "You have to stop acting like this is your house," he muttered. "We co-signed, but it's mine too." I stood up. For the first time in my life, I looked at my son and didn't recognize him. He wasn't the boy who used to fall asleep on my shoulder after nightmares. He was a man asking me to surrender everything I had left. It wasn't the shouting that hurt. It was the calmness, the business tone, like he'd already decided I didn't matter. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I packed. Quietly. I waited until the house was asleep. I knew every floorboard that creaked, every drawer that stuck. I packed slowly. A sweater, a few dresses, my meds, a photo of Albert, and the same paperback I'd been trying to finish for months. At dawn, I made tea one last time. I didn't even turn on the light. I just stood there watching the sky turn from navy blue to ash gray. Then I walked out the door. No note. No explanation. Across the street, Mr. Humphrey was watering his lawn like always. He looked up, saw my suitcase, and said softly, "Everything okay?" "I don't know," I replied. "Can I come in?" He didn't hesitate. Of course. Mr. Humphrey's house was unlike mine. It was quiet, not the kind of silence that screams with tension, but the kind that feels like a soft blanket. Every item had its place. There were no toys on the floor, no shoes left by the stairs, no shouting, no guilt, no demands. He brewed tea. Real tea from loose leaves, not bags. We sat in his living room for a while, not saying much. Just sipping. I left, I said after a few minutes. He nodded as if he already knew. It was time, he said. That afternoon, I picked up my phone for the first time since leaving and started making the calls. First, the bank. Hello, this is Patricia Reynolds. I'd like to cancel the automatic mortgage payments from my account. The woman on the line paused. You're the co-signer, correct? Yes, but I no longer live in that home. You understand this will place full responsibility on the primary borrower. Yes, I said. I understand. That's the point. Next were the utilities, electric, gas, internet, all in my name, all funded by my pension. I shut them off one by one, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but because I no longer lived there, and it was time I stopped paying for a life that had no room for me. By the time I was done, I felt lighter. Not vindicated, not victorious, just free. That evening my phone rang. It was him. I didn't answer. 5 minutes later, another call, then a text, "Where are you? Are you okay?" The bank called. The mortgage didn't go through. Did you change something, Mom? This isn't funny. Call me. I turned off the phone. That night I slept in Mr. Humphrey's spare bedroom, a twin bed under a crocheted blanket that smelled faintly of cedar and old books. I slept like a child. No guilt. No yelling. No one asking for money. No one measuring my worth by the dollars I saved them. In the morning I woke to the scent of coffee and the gentle clink of dishes. Mr. Humphrey greeted me with a smile and a skillet of eggs. You like them soft or firm? He asked. I like them quiet, I replied, and he chuckled. After breakfast I offered to wash the dishes. He waved me off, but I insisted. I'm not a guest, I told him. I'm a grown woman. I pay my way. And I meant it. That afternoon we went grocery shopping. 2 carts, 2 lists. I didn't need much, some apples, crackers, milk, and of course tea. At the checkout, the cashier asked, Is this one order or 2? Separate, please, I said clearly. It was a tiny moment, insignificant to anyone else. But for me, it meant everything. I was paying for my own life again. No more quiet giving. Mr. Humphrey and I fell into a rhythm. He cooked breakfast, I cooked dinner. We kept a small notepad by the fridge to track shared expenses. Nothing dramatic, no tension, just mutual respect. I cleaned my room, washed my own laundry, not because I had to, but because I could, because it was mine. My phone buzzed daily, missed calls, texts, always from him. We miss you. The kids want to see you. I was wrong. Come home. The bills are piling up. I don't know how to fix this. I didn't respond. Not every time. And when I did, it was short, polite, distant. I wasn't ready to be drawn back into that house where I'd become invisible. Then one afternoon, while pruning Mr. Humphrey's gardenias, I saw a small figure standing on the porch. It was Gracie. Her backpack hung on her shoulders. In her hands, a tiny bouquet of dandelions. Grandma, she said, her voice barely louder than the wind. Are you mad at us? I froze. My heart clenched. I knelt down, held her tight. Never, sweetheart. Never. Then why aren't you home? I smiled softly, brushing her hair behind her ear. I needed space. Grown-up space. To think and rest. She nodded, even though she was only 8. Then she whispered, Daddy cries sometimes. I think he doesn't know I hear. That hurt, not because I wanted him to cry, but because I didn't. I wanted him to grow. That night I sat with Mr. Humphrey and said I might go back soon. He stirred his tea. Are you ready? Not unless the rules change, I replied. I won't go back to being the one who quietly fills in every gap. He nodded. You don't owe anyone your savings, only your boundaries. And that's when I took out a blank piece of paper and began writing my terms. That night, after Gracie's visit, I couldn't sleep. Her words lingered. Daddy cries sometimes, not because I wanted him to suffer, but because I never wanted to be the reason anyone in that house felt helpless. And yet I also knew I couldn't return under the same terms. Love doesn't mean losing yourself. Sacrifice doesn't mean surrender. So I took out a pen and a piece of paper. The lines weren't perfect, but they were honest. Rules for returning. If I choose to 1, joint budget, every dollar tracked. 2, everyone contributes. 3, no more silent giving. 4, personal money stays personal. 5, no more guilt. 6, no more begging. 7, respect is non-negotiable. I stared at those words. They weren't demands. They were boundaries, ones I should have drawn long ago. The next morning I called my son. I want to see you, I said. Just you. No kids. Just 2 adults. He hesitated. Okay. Where? At the park. 3, Othero. When I arrived, he was already sitting on a bench beneath the old oak tree. He looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but emotionally. His shoulders slumped. His eyes were tired. I sat down beside him. We said nothing for a while. Just listened to the breeze. I miss you, he said finally. I miss the version of you that saw me as a mother. I replied. He didn't argue. He just nodded. I've been a fool, he said after a pause. I didn't realize how much you did. That's because I never made you realize, I said gently. But that's over now. We sat quietly for another moment before he asked, What happens now? I handed him the paper. These are the terms. He read each line carefully. I watched his face. He didn't look angry. He looked relieved. Okay, he said. I can do this. Then maybe, I replied, standing up, we can start again. But I won't go back to being invisible. You won't be, he said softly, and we both knew time would tell. I didn't move back right away. I visited, once a week at first, then twice. I'd help Gracie with homework, maybe fold laundry if I felt like it. But I always returned to Mr. Humphreys afterward. Not out of bitterness, but because I was rebuilding, rewriting the terms of my worth. Not as a caretaker, not as a wallet, but as a person. One Wednesday night, I walked into their kitchen and stopped cold. He was cooking, not microwaving leftovers, not heating frozen pizza. Cooking. Real cooking. He had an apron on. There were onions chopped on the counter. A skillet sizzling. It's chicken piccata, he said, smiling nervously. Don't get too excited. I followed a YouTube video. I chuckled. It smells good. That night we all sat around the table. The kids giggled. My son asked me about my book club. I didn't say much, just watched. And then it happened. He poured me a glass of water first. It was small, but it was everything. The first time I felt seen. In Maalsondin, Dasko. The changes weren't loud. They didn't come with grand apologies or emotional speeches. Instead, they arrived in small, quiet gestures, like a glass of water poured first, or him remembering I liked my tea strong, no sugar. There was a budget taped to the fridge now, typed, clear, with columns, mortgage utilities, groceries, everyone's share listed. My name wasn't missing this time. I wasn't just there. I was counted. One day I found an envelope on the counter, Mom's personal written on it. Inside 3 crisp $20 bills. No note. No expectation. Just a quiet recognition that I had my own needs too. He said thank you more often now. Not just with words, but in actions. The laundry was folded before I arrived. He started packing the kids' lunches himself, and for the first time in years, I saw him truly try, not because he was desperate, but because he was learning. One weekend, while cleaning the garage, we stumbled upon an old cardboard box marked Mom's stuff. Inside were things I thought had vanished: my wedding album, Albert's tie, from our 25th anniversary, and a crayon-written note from Ryan that said, "You're my hero, Mom." I didn't say anything, but I saw him pause, take in the contents of the box. Slowly, he closed the lid and said, "I don't know why this was in storage. It should have been in the living room." I just nodded and placed the photo of me and Albert back on top. A week later, something unexpected happened. I walked into the kitchen and found a brand new ceramic mug sitting by the stove. White, simple but bold black letters across the front read, "This home was built by her hands." He didn't say anything when I saw it. He just nodded toward it, like a quiet offering. And I felt something loosen in my chest, something that had been knotted for far too long. That evening, we sat in the living room. The kids bickered over the remote, just like old times. But the atmosphere felt different, less frantic, more rooted. He turned to me and asked almost hesitantly, "Do you think we're better now?" I looked around. The lights were on. The bills were paid. The silence wasn't tense. No one was begging. And most importantly, no one was invisible. "We're getting there," I said. He reached over and gently squeezed my hand. I didn't need fireworks. I didn't need an apology in bold letters. I just needed the quiet rebuilding of trust, of dignity, of shared space. These days I sleep in my own bed again. Not because I had nowhere else to go, but because I chose to return with new rules and a new sense of worth. I cook when I want to. I rest when I need to. No one questions me. At the store, I buy the brands I like. I take long walks. I read mystery novels on the porch. Sometimes Gracie brings me dandelions. Sometimes Ryan brings me tea. And once in a while, on days I never expect, my son hugs me without saying a word. And those are the loudest moments of all. I didn't feel like a guest in my own home anymore. But I didn't fall back into my old role either. I didn't become the quiet woman who filled in the cracks while everyone else lived comfortably above them. I was there, yes, but I was also seen, heard, and respected. I visited on my terms. Some afternoons I'd come by and help Gracie with her spelling words. Sometimes I'd bring a basket of muffins or fold a load of laundry if I had the energy. But there were days I didn't do anything at all. And no one asked why. That was new. One Thursday morning I arrived to find Ryan trying to fix the vacuum. He looked frustrated, surrounded by parts and screws. "Need help?" I asked. He looked up surprised. "Grandma, can you fix vacuums?" I smiled. "No, but I know how to read manuals." We sat on the floor sorting through instructions and wires. He told me about a science project he was planning. He wanted to build a model of a tornado using plastic bottles. "It's messy," he warned. I laughed. "So was raising your father." He blinked. "Dad was messy, very," I said, "but smart and kind." When he remembered, Ryan nodded, then said quietly, "I'm glad you're back." My heart clenched, but in a good way. I didn't say anything. I just squeezed his shoulder. That afternoon, my son came home early from work. I was sitting on the porch, tea in hand, reading. He sat beside me, without speaking. After a long pause, he said, "I was scared, of what, that you'd never come back." "I didn't come back," I said. "I came to visit." "There's a difference." He nodded slowly. "I know. And I'm trying. I see that." He exhaled, looked down at his hands. "Sometimes I feel like I failed you." "You didn't fail me," I replied. "You forgot me." "That's not the same thing." We sat there in the quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't sting, the kind that just breathes. Later that week, he handed me a printed sheet. It was an updated budget, color-coded, thoughtfully laid out. I added categories for school supplies and emergencies, he said, and there's a column for your contributions if and when you want to add. I smiled. "You're learning." "I'm trying to." That Sunday during dinner, something changed. We were passing around dishes, salad, rice, grilled chicken. And just before I reached for my plate, Ryan said, "Wait." He stood up, held up his glass of juice. "To Grandma," he said, "for everything she built, and everything she still is." The table went silent. My son looked stunned. Gracie clapped. And I nearly cried. But I didn't. I just raised my glass and said, "To moving forward." That toast marked something, not an ending, not a complete fix, but a step away from invisibility and toward balance. The next few weeks brought more shifts, not dramatic ones, but steady, like the slow thaw after a long winter. He started changing not just in how he spoke, but how he saw. He no longer talked over me in conversations. When I offered advice about the kids or life, he listened, even when he didn't agree. He no longer made me feel like a ghost occupying a chair in his home. One afternoon, I found him doing something I'd never seen before, washing the baseboards. "You okay?" I asked. He chuckled. "Just noticed how much dust collects down here. You used to do this, didn't you?" I smiled. "Every week. You just never noticed." "I do now." Those 3 words stayed with me all day. Later, I walked into my room, the same room I used to fold laundry and cry and sacrifice in. Now it was filled with air and sunlight. There was a small pot of daisies on the windowsill. A note sat next to it. "Mom, thank you for giving more than I ever realized. I see you now." I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't moved, but because I'd cried enough. Now I wanted to live. And I did. I went to book club every Tuesday. I met a few other women around my age. We shared stories not about aches and pains, but about triumphs and rediscoveries. One of them said, "Sometimes you have to teach the people around you how to love you properly." I never forgot that. Back home, I noticed the difference more clearly. My son printed out chore charts for the kids. He gave them small responsibilities, dishes, making their beds, folding their clothes. At first, they groaned, but slowly they adjusted. They started understanding effort, respect, that things don't just appear, they're made by hands and care and time. One day, Ryan came home from school, sat beside me on the porch, and asked Grandma, "Were you ever scared being alone?" I took a deep breath. Yes, but sometimes being alone is the only way to remember who you are. He nodded, thoughtful. Later that night, I saw my son sitting at the dining table with Bill's spread out calculator in hand. He didn't call for me, didn't ask for help. He was learning. We had dinner late. Nothing fancy, just grilled cheese and soup. But before we ate, he looked at me and said, "I paid the mortgage today." I blinked. "You did?" He nodded. "On time. With my own account." I smiled. "That's good. I wanted you to know." And I did. I knew. Because I'd stopped carrying everything on my back, and it made room for him to finally stand up straight. That night before bed, he walked into the kitchen holding a small wooden frame. "This was in the garage," he said, handing it to me. Inside was a picture of Albert and me, smiling, young, alive. "I cleaned the shelf in the hallway," he added. "Thought this belonged there." I held it for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you." It wasn't about control anymore. It wasn't about who paid which bill, who cooked more dinners, or who cleaned the kitchen best. Those had been the battlegrounds of our past, where unspoken resentment simmered quietly under every gesture. Now it was about mutual presence, shared respect, honest contribution. The house no longer leaned on me. It stood with me. One morning I woke early and found Gracie at the table with colored pencils, tongue poking out as she carefully wrote something on a folded piece of paper. "Working on a secret?" I asked playfully. She blushed. "Sort of. It's for my school family tree project." I expected to see the usual stick figure diagrams. Instead, she opened the paper and pointed. There at the roots in big bright letters it said, "My grandma, the one who held us together." I blinked. "Is it okay?" she asked. I reached out and tucked her hair behind her ear. "It's more than okay, sweetheart." Later that day, my son saw the project on the counter. He stared at it for a long time, then turned to me and simply said, "She's right, you know." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The acknowledgement had already found its place. That week, I began doing something I hadn't done in years, I wrote in my journal. Not because I needed to vent, but because I had things I wanted to remember. Things like the sound of laughter returning to the kitchen, the way Ryan started opening doors for me without thinking, how my son cleaned up after dinner without being asked, and how I at last felt no pressure to fill silence with service. One afternoon, I returned home from the grocery store and noticed a new key on my key ring. It had a yellow tag. I asked my son about it. He smiled and said, "It's a copy of the safe key. I want you to have it, just in case." In case of what? In case I forget again. That sentence undid me more than any apology ever could. In case I forget again. He was learning, still flawed, still fumbling. But he was trying, and that mattered more than perfection ever would. That weekend, we cleaned out the attic together. Decades of dusty boxes and old furniture photo albums and holiday cards. At one point, we found a small hand-painted wooden sign. I'd made it during a crafting class years ago. It read, "In this house we grow together." He looked at it, then at me. "Can I hang this in the hallway?" "Yes," I whispered. "Please do." That evening after the kids went to bed, he asked me to stay for tea. We sat quietly for a while. Then he asked something that made my breath catch. "Do you think I'm becoming a better man?" I looked at him not as a mother, looking at her child, but as a woman looking at another adult with clarity. "You're becoming someone your children will be proud to know, and someone your mother is proud to stand beside, not behind." He blinked hard. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me." I smiled. "I didn't stay for you. I stayed for myself. You just happened to rise with me." And we sat there, two people who had hurt, healed, and rebuilt, not with noise, but with quiet, unshakable presence. Gracie came to me one morning with a drawing. It was a little lopsided house with stick figures standing outside. I could tell which one was me, gray hair, teacup in hand. Her dad was there too, and Ryan. But something had changed. This time I wasn't standing behind the house. I was in the center of it. "Do you like it?" she asked, hopeful. "I love it," I replied, hugging her tightly. "You put me right where I belong." That small piece of paper sat on my dresser for weeks. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. A child's vision of home reshaped by truth, by presence, by quiet healing. That weekend I noticed something even more powerful. Ryan was sitting at the table doing his homework. He paused, looked at his pencil, and then said, "Grandma, do you think people forget who helps them? Because it's easier." I turned from the sink slowly. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" He looked down, unsure. "I mean, you were always helping and no one said anything. Maybe because if we don't look too closely, we don't feel bad about not helping back." My breath caught. That was more insight than most adults had. "Maybe," I said, "but when we finally see it, really see it, that's when we start growing." He nodded slowly. Later that day, I saw something that made my heart pause. My son was folding laundry, Ryan's laundry, but he wasn't rushing. He was checking socks for holes matching colors carefully. Gracie walked past and kissed his arm. He didn't flinch. He just smiled. There it was again, A man I didn't recognize, once learning how to care. That night, we had soup again. Gracie wanted to help stir, and Ryan set the table. My son brought out bread he'd baked himself, nothing fancy, just a loaf with a golden crust and the smell of butter and rosemary. When we sat down, no one said grace. But there was gratitude anyway. It lived in the air, in the stillness, in the clinking of spoons and soft laughter. After dinner, I started to help clear the table. My son gently stopped me. "Not tonight, Mom," he said. "Just sit." So I did. I watched them the way Ryan helped Gracie with the leftover bowls, the way my son wiped crumbs from the counter without being asked. No performance, no show, just rhythm, just love. And for the first time in years, I realized something I had taught them all along. Not by commanding, but by being. I wasn't invisible. I was foundational. There are some things you can't say aloud, not because you don't mean them, but because speaking them would unravel you. So I wrote a letter. Not for now, not to hand to anyone at the dinner table, but for one day when I'm no longer in the kitchen, humming or on the porch sipping tea or tucking blankets around sleepy grandchildren. It's a letter for when my voice is no longer in the room, but maybe still in their hearts. To my family, I never wanted thanks. I never needed fanfare. I didn't raise you for gratitude. I raised you for love. I spent most of my life giving quietly. Not because I was afraid to speak, but because I believed love should never be loud to be real. But I realize now, quiet giving when taken for granted can become invisible. I forgive that. Not because it didn't hurt, but because holding on to pain weighs more than you think. I am proud of the man you are becoming. Not perfect, but present. And that is all a mother ever hopes for. To Gracie, never let anyone tell you your softness is weakness. It's your superpower. To Ryan, your questions are your strength. Never stop asking. Never stop seeing. And to my son, thank you for learning how to love me again, not as your caregiver, but as a person. I was never living off you. I was building under you. A foundation, a home. Yours always, Mom. I folded the letter, tucked it into a small envelope, and placed it in the back of my recipe book, right between Albert's favorite chicken casserole and Gracie's chocolate muffins. It'll find its way to them one day. Maybe when they're looking for a recipe. Maybe when they need to remember what love built looks like. That evening we sat outside together. Ryan was chasing fireflies. Gracie curled beside me on the swing head against my shoulder. My son sat across from us, sipping tea from a mug that said, "This home was built by her hands." The lights in the house glowed behind us. Warm, steady. Not grand, but enough. He looked up at me and smiled. "You okay, Mom?" "I am now," I said. And I meant it. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had finally come home to myself. To the mother quietly making dinner in a house where no one thanks her. To the father fixing what's broken, even when no one notices. To the grandparents sitting at the edge of a couch, feeling like a guest in their own family. This part is for you. You were never invisible. They just stopped looking. And sometimes the only way to be seen again is to walk away, not in anger, but in clarity. To say with your silence, I deserve more than survival. I never planned to leave. I never dreamed I'd pack a suitcase in the dark with nothing but dignity and a single framed photo. But sometimes staying quiet becomes a cage. And sometimes walking away is the kindest thing you can do for them and for yourself, because absence can echo louder than presence ever could. In my case, it took $820 of unpaid bills to make my son realize the true cost of everything I gave. But the story wasn't about the money. It was never about the mortgage. It was about value and how easily it disappears when the ones you love most stop seeing it. But here's what I want you to know. Even when they forgot your birthday, even when they rolled their eyes when you spoke, even when they acted like your life was over and theirs was just beginning, you mattered. You built the roof they sleep under. You folded the towels they wipe their faces with. You paid the bills they never saw. You kept the lights on not just in the hallway, but in their lives. And even if they never say thank you, you are not less. You are not too much. You are not a burden. You are a foundation. And one day they'll realize homes don't collapse in storms because of the walls. They stand because of what's underneath. Because of you. Jenny.